On February 11th, 1997, Matador Records released Brighten the Corners, the fourth proper album by the excellent American rock and roll band Pavement. I was a huge fan of Pavement by then, collecting all of their full-length albums, EPs, and singles, and recording their various TV appearances on my parents' VCR, and then making my friends watch such things with me whenever I could. I'd only seen Pavement once live by then, but I got to see them again on their subsequent Toronto stops, including their show at the Phoenix Concert Theatre on the Brighten the Corners tour. Some have called Brighten the Corners Pavement's best album. Others hear it as the beginning of the end of a band that would subsequently only release one more record, 1999's Terror Twilight. I don't know about all that, but I do know that Brighten the Corners has always meant the world to me, and so I decided to delve into it on this show. Featuring revealing insights and fuzzy recollections about things that happened more than 20 years ago, this is percussionist, shouter, keyboard player Bob Nastanovich, and drummer Steve West of Pavement discussing their album Brighten the Corners on the 373rd episode of Creative Control with your host, me, Vish Khanna.
Jonathan Peele. 1, 2, 3, 4.
After emerging from Stockton, California in 1989, Pavement became an underground and critics' favorite thanks to the release of mysterious, noise-infused singles and EPs, and their undeniably stellar debut album, 1992's Slanted and Enchanted. Founded by singers and guitarists Stephen Malkmus and Scott Canterberg, Pavement soon included drummer Gary Young, bassist Mark Ibold, and percussionist Bob Nastanovich. Malkmus once held a job as a security guard at the Whitney Museum in New York City, where he befriended and eventually collaborated with poet David Berman and drummer Steve West in Berman's band Silver Jews. Gary Young was an excellent drummer, but he was erratic and eccentric, and he was eventually replaced by West in 1993, just as Pavement's star was on the rise. They began to get mainstream attention with the release of 1994's excellent Crooked Rain, and quickly followed that up in 1995 with the comparably sprawling and experimental Wowie Zowie. They took that record on the road, including a midday slot on the 1995 Lollapalooza tour, which Bob Nastanovich recalls fondly.
Well, Lollapalooza was, wasn't bad for Pavement.
It
was bad for Lollapalooza.
I saw that. That's the first time I saw Pavement actually live. Was on that the Toronto stop or the Barrie, Ontario stop.
I don't even remember that one. It couldn't have been that bad.
It was the first show without Sinead O'Connor, I believe. Elastica played.
Oh, okay, yeah. That would have been like the 7th or 8th one, I think. Yeah, no, it was fine. It was great for us. How great could it be to like hang out in the Jesus Lizard trailer all day? I mean, you got the ultimate 1 a.m. band playing at 2 in the afternoon. You play at 4, and then actually the smartest thing we did on that tour was, and quite frankly, it was my idea, Vish. We rented 2 minivans in Seattle. I got a hell of a deal on 2 Ford Windstars. And we took them on the entire tour, which was like, I'm going to say 5 weeks long. Might have been longer. And all the other bands were trapped at Lollapalooza all day because they had buses. And we'd show up in these minivans, and we had these like very elaborate passes with holograms and stuff like that. And it was so amazing. We'd show up every day and like with these 2 minivans, often separately, sometimes together. And we'd be in there. And like when you tour Lollapalooza, they give you like an 18-wheeler to put your gear in. And our gear filled like 1/5 of a tractor trailer. Whereas like every other band on the tour, I think properly filled theirs. I mean, obviously Sonic Youth did just with their guitars and, Hole with Courtney's wardrobe cases and like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones with their 27 members and, who else,
Beck,
all kinds of.
Beck was on that tour?
Yeah, Beck, Joey Waronker went on, played drums for REM, and Abby played bass, and she was in a bunch of other bands, and it was weird. Those people were so pro rock, it was like, and Cypress Hill was on there. I guaranteed they filled their truck out. So we actually had to fill our trucks. So we bought a ping pong table, and they would they would set it up every day for us, like in a special spot. And like we would just kind of play ping pong all day.
If this sounds ridiculous or possibly even made up, let the record show that drummer Steve West backs up Bob's story here.
Lollapalooza carried all of our equipment, and we had requested a ping pong table, so they put that in the big trucks too. And so we'd just show up and be able to play ping pong for most of the day, and then into the evening after our performance, and I think we usually played around 5 or 6. So it was very cush touring compared to what we were normally used to. With a show every night and getting in late and all of that. We were always done by like 6 or 7 o'clock, and the Lollapalooza tour was rigorous, but nothing compared to, when we'd play a show, like 6, 7 shows a week, and Lollapalooza was like 5 or 4 shows a week. So
right,
we could all leave at 6, and like at that point, our band was pretty much exclusively staying in Best Westerns. I was a Gold Crown Club member, and so I accrued a massive amount of points on my card to the point where I got a couple of free sets of tires, which came in handy. And Best Western at the time was actually a really good hotel chain. We all loved it in that every location was different. Like, it wasn't like going to the Motel 6, which was the official hotel of Jesus Lizard, where, essentially the beauty of Motel 6 is like, even though you're traveling all the time and you're staying in a low grade motel room, you basically are going back to the same apartment every night because they're all the same. All the Best Westerns had a tremendous amount of variety, so it was great. But what we got really into on that tour, we had a great cast of characters. We had Noel Kilbride, who I just saw the other day for the first time in a long time. He'd have been the guitar tech on that tour, and that's when we met Debbie Pastor, who became our tour manager for the last several years of Pavement. She was working with the Jesus Lizard at the time. And then we also met Andy Dimmick on that tour, who became is sort of a huge part of Pavement and is a big part of Steve West band Marble Valley, and one of my favorite human beings, and as is Deb. So we met like an incredible number of great people and got to hang out with them all the time. Like, we cemented friendships, and like we had a blast. So, but what we were really into was leaving Lollapalooza like an hour after we played. Sometimes we would stay if it was like pretty, and like we'd watch Sonic Youth and stuff, and but most of the time we would leave and do the research and head in the direction of the next town and put ourselves up in a Best Western. And I'm going to say, of the, let's just say 40 nights of Lollapalooza, we probably bowled in 25 different American bowling alleys.
That's awesome.
So that became the theme of the tour. Like, none of us are particularly good at bowling, but we're also not, we're willing to bowl. Okay. And
were sports an important aspect of Pavement? Did you guys appreciate sports? Did you play sports?
Oh, yeah. I'm the least sporty of the guys, but they talked about sports and all the time. Bob's a huge sports fan. Steven's a huge sports fan. Scott is too as well. Maybe I bowled not as much, but he could hold his own.
Sure.
And that's actually goes an important part of Brighten the Corners, actually, because Brighten the Corners was recorded in Kernersville, North Carolina, at Mitch Easter's house. All Kernersville they had a really proper bowling alley, and we would go there every day when we recorded it. And I feel like I was there for about 2 weeks. We were staying in a Quality, and they didn't have a Best Western. And I think I roomed with I bowled. I can't remember. But we bowled every day. But one of the most amazing features of the bowling alley was the #1 ranked female bowler in the world bowled there.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay, and I can't remember her name, but like, she would go there every day, and we'd be bowling like in lane 2. They kept us like 7 or 8 lanes away from her because we were the only other people bowling, and she would be bowling like whatever 240 games or 270 games, practicing, and like there was a banner all the way across the back of the bowling alley, like, that said home of this woman whose name I cannot remember. I could probably find it on the internet. So it was kind of amazing. It's like, and she was an amazing like character to watch. I'm going to say she was like in her mid 30s, and like, she's very Southern, and she had a very Southern name, and she had like a big pile of like, she was kind of pretty in her own sort of Southern grace way. She was a bowler, like, and she was like a bowler to the max. So like it was like kind of electrifying. Like you could look like 7 lanes down, like watch this like legendary bowler.
Sure, yeah.
And then also like the other substantial feature of that session that I recall was it was during the Atlanta Summer Olympics that we recorded it. So
yeah,
it would have been 96. So we were watching the Olympics all the time, getting really into it. I remember Eyebold had never really watched the Olympics before, and like he got really into it. And so we're watching the Olympics and bowling and eating tacos, and then go into these bars. This one bar, they had one bar, and like at night, like we like to drink beer and shoot pool. But it was one of those clubs where you had to like join the club, like you had to sign up for like it was a dive bar, but like you had to sign up.
Yeah.
And there was kind of some sketchy people in there, like. It was like sketchy. There was like people like, we don't, y'all boys aren't from around here type kind of people,
Right.
But we were kind of in there about 4 or 5 nights a week shooting pool. We'd actually have to like take them on and stuff and, play doubles with them for I believe I think there might've been 2 tables. There could have been 1. So you had to compete to get the table and that kind of thing. So it was kind of a typical Pavement recording session in that, just like the records we made in Memphis, like we weren't eating barbecue or, we did the records in Memphis. Wowie Zowie's, I guess, the one that we should sort of talk about because aside from Bright in the Corners, because this is sort of an era in Pavement at which we'd actually become a band.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like we'd played a lot of shows at that point, like, the project years were over. That kind of ended. The band really became officially a band during Watery Domestic, and then heading into Crooked Rain, which was sort of a somewhat dismantled project, and it was recorded in phases, and like that it was like a New York record, and like there was a certain amount of awkwardness. And then Wowie Zowie was the first record that we ever did where Gary left the band. Gary quit. And Wowie Zowie did it easily, which was, familiar environs and a place to immediately feel comfortable. But then, like, all those songs that we on Wowie Zowie and all the side tracks and everything associated with it, we knew those songs. We went in. Like, we'd been practicing. We'd played them live. Like, a lot of them we'd played live. Mm-hmm. And it was the same case in a lot of ways with Bright in the Corner. So I'd have to look at the track listing to sort of figure out like what songs we already had or what songs we'd practiced in sound checks or what songs that were like working into the set. Because that's how Pavement worked. Like since we didn't live in the same town, we didn't practice. Essentially, Malcolmus would be like looking forward to the next recording session because he'd be bored with the songs that he was playing on that tour. And he'd be like, I got a couple new ones. Like we can work them in there. Like, and I'd look at set lists at the time and there's like set lists that like, where the song is called like Stereolab or the song's called like Sebadoh.
Right.
And it was good. And I think a lot of bands do that because like it kind of like he'd be like, yeah, it sounds like Sebadoh, but it's cool. I'll make it Pavement-y. Like that's the way he is. And like, but that's how heavily like people talk about influences. It's amazing that Pavement like constantly gets the tag of being a band that sounds like The Fall because we actually sound like about 80 bands.
Yeah.
I know we sound way more like Sonic Youth or REM than we do The Fall to me. Like,
yeah.
But we always get the Fall thing because of Conduit for Sale and Two States and a few other songs. Like, whatever, I can hear it.
After the Wowie Zowie tour, do you have any sense or memory of what that period was like? Did you have a sense that the band was in any kind of transition after all of that activity leading into Bright in the Corner?
I think we're all kind of doing our own things at that point. We had toured so much between the previous 2 albums. I think that there was a little bit of a break there.
Right.
And then the summer came along and those guys came over here and we kind of rehearsed for the Bright in the Corners. I think that we were just like taking time away from each other. I'm not sure when that Pacific Trim thing came out either.
Oh,
I
that's
think
right.
that
Yeah.
was maybe that's what we did. Bob and Steven and I did that Pacific Trim thing at some point. So that was kind of a transition between the two.
Increased mother told her daddy, I roundly disagree with you. Your vocal style's too preachy. All the yokels mock your teaching. But Cotton, he was just so oblivious to all their cutting pleas.
And that was in Memphis. That was at Easley Studio.
Right.
I don't remember why we went down there. Maybe that was we did something with Silver Jews, and then that fell through, so we used it to do the Pacific Trim. I can't really remember exactly.
It's fine. Yeah, this I guess the Pacific Trim thing is significant, and no, Bob hadn't brought that up. I mean, that you're saying that was just you, Bob, and Steven?
Yeah, I think that what happened, we went down there to do something with David of the Silver Jews, and that fell through. So it was just the three of us there, and we figured we didn't want to. We could use the time to do some pavement stuff with just the three of us, and then they wouldn't lose their booked time because they had booked time with David, and then he wasn't able to, do his bit. So. If I remember that correctly, I mean, I know that happened at some point. I'm not sure if it was Pacific. I think it was Pacific Trim.
No, that would make sense, and I kind of now see. I mean, I'd kind of neglected that EP, and that EP meant a lot to me when it came out at the time. I really liked it, and it really showcased a kind of sense of humor. I think I've following Pavement, I knew the band had a sense of humor, but there was something kind of loose about that. And when you think of Stereo or Shady Lane, even. There's sort of a connection there, isn't there?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
With just being me and Bob and Steven, it was a whole different feel. And maybe a little less, like, who knows whether we would have used it. There was very little pressure to get something done. It was just like, let's just do this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Did the tour behind Wowie Zowie seem wild? Like that Wowie Zowie seems, I listened back to it again for the first time in a while. It's a pretty wild record in comparison to Brighten the Corners. Brighten the Corners seems a little more calm. Would you agree?
Yeah, of course. I think that Wowie Zowie was a combination of coming off of the Crooked Rain, and we did some of the recordings there in New York and as well as in Memphis. So that was a combination of like 2.5 years of pretty much touring quite a lot. So I think that was just kind of like very intense. Mm-hmm. And then we took probably for the first time, some ample time off to come down, and then Brighten the Corners came along. So that's probably shows a little bit of difference. Steven might have had more time to reflect and relax a little bit to work on the next album.
I mean, when I think of Brighten the Corners and the Pacific Trim, they're relatively clean, would you say? Like clean sounding records compared to what Pavement had done in the past.
Yeah, I think he was branching out and trying different sounds and maybe cleaning up not as many guitars and stuff, overlaying and things like that.
Was that articulated, or was that just something you all just experienced at the same? Like, you're like, oh, this is just a different. Like, did it feel different to you?
No, it was always very organic, and nothing was planned or talked about.
Okay.
Mitch was very easy to record with. I remember West had a lot of pressure on him the first couple of days because the first thing you do in this sort of traditional type setting is you get the drum tracks right, and then so there was all the pressure was off him early, and it was kind of really pretty easy to make, to be honest with you.
Tell me about working with Mitch, the experience of working with Mitch Easter.
It was a real pleasure. He was a sweetheart, a professional. He pretty much recorded us, the basic tracks, and then we used his house, to hang out in and do the recording as well. But and then Bryce Goggin came down to do some other overdubs, and then they went and mixed it in a completely different place. So Mitch was there when we needed him, and then kind of did yard work when Bryce came into the picture. So it was very comfortable. We had recorded at practiced at my house, and I have a really old house like Mitch's, So we went from one old house in Virginia to one in North Carolina, which was like 3 or 4 hours away from each other. So it seemed very similar places, and maybe that helped with the feel of the album.
I can't exactly picture Mitch's house right now, but it was a nice house, and he had great equipment in there, and like all that kind of stuff that like other people would have to tell you about that. But everything worked. Everything was great. Mitch is a fantastic host, and Don Dixon would come by, and of course, we're somewhat intimidated by Mitch from the standpoint that I'll just speak for myself. I was a huge Let's Active fan.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously a huge fan of all of his work with REM. So, like, to me, he'd been like a legend since I was like 14 or 15. And I'd seen Let's Active. I'd road trip to see Let's Active. So to me, but he's like, in a great way, sort of like Doug Easley, like he immediately makes you feel at home and makes you feel comfortable. Okay. Cause like I've heard about all these people that have to do these tours, they have to do these albums now, and they walk into a studio and they don't feel comfortable there, but mostly because like the engineers or whatever. I mean, like, I don't even know at what point, like in the music industry, like engineers and studio guys became like famous, but I guess it's been going on in rock and roll for 100 years, 50 years or something. But
yeah,
at the same time, like the key to making a good record, or at least being yourself as a band, is to record in a place where you kind of instantly feel comfortable. And thankfully, Mitch's house provided that.
Both you and Bob invoked the word comfort. You mentioned that it was comfortable. Was this comparably an easy record to make compared to maybe other Pavement records?
I don't think it was any easier or any harder. I just think, Mitch's place was a home, not like a professional, super looking studio like we did in New York for the last album. So, that kind of high-end studio can give you a little bit more pressure, and it makes you think, oh, I better get something done today, which we never really experienced until the last album. So that's probably what was comfortable. And then there was the Olympics were going on, so we had the sports connection there during the overdubs and the weeks that we were 2 weeks we were there. So we go in the living room and watch that while things were going on in the rest of the house.
Now, you're not a sports guy. Did you get into the Olympics? Did you get the fever?
Oh, well, just sitting around Bob and listening to him talk about it. Yeah, you can get into it.
Bob is infectious. When he gets excited, you get excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I want to begin by asking about stereo, and I'll just throw some stuff at you and see how it lands, because the first verse, it seems to allude to sports and the spectator sports.
Pigs, they tend to wiggle when they walk. The infrastructure rots, and the owners hate the jocks with their agents and their dates. If the signatures are checked,
You'll just have to wait.
and we're counting up the instants that we saved. Tired nation so depraved, from the cheap seats see us wave to the camera. It took a giant ramrod to raise the demon settlement, but hi-ho, silver ride.
By the second verse, we're talking about Geddy Lee and Rush, and then the Lone Ranger is a motif with the Hi-Ho Silver Ride. What is your take on what's going on stereo? Do you have any sense of where Steven was coming from with the ideas in this song?
Well, the Geddy Lee is just comedy. So he's just trying to be funny and clever.
What about the voice of Geddy Lee? How did it get so high? I wonder if he speaks like an ordinary guy.
I know him, and he does.
And you're my fact-checking cub.
No, it's just typical Steven. Like, one thing you got to be aware of, or the way I always like really sort of got it with the lyrics and how he put them together, was a lot of the words came off the Scrabble board. Yeah, I'm not kidding. And he was a scribbler, but he would he's clever, and he's, he basically would, whatever he would be amused by, and, I think that words fit, generally speaking, I think that I actually have to ask him, and he's he's probably difficult to even ask about it, because it's probably something that he doesn't really like to talk about, because I'm not aware of the entire Jix catalog, but at least in terms of his lyrics and Pavement, and then I would say that he was just, that's his sense of humor.
And you know, Bob, was a huge influence just in his vibrato. I mean, his personality and talk. You know, he was such a big influence on the band, even though he didn't write songs, or you know, and sometimes he wasn't even playing on the albums for some of them. But his personality and just general enthusiasm about the band, about connecting with the fans, and his personality really. And sports was one of them.
Yeah.
And you know, also they would always play Scrabble, and he and I would play chess sometimes, and of course the ping pong, and you know, anything. You know, there's a lot of downtime on tour when you're waiting to play, and so if you're going to play pool or whatever games, that was always somehow to entertain ourselves.
When I asked Bob about some of the lyrical stuff, which, you know, obviously I don't expect you guys to speak too much on the lyrical stuff. That would be up to Steven and Scott. But he mentioned Scrabble. He mentioned that, you know, when I was talking about some of the word choices in songs like Stereo or Shady Lane, for example, he suggested that, you know, you guys would play a lot of Scrabble, and maybe some of that would make it into the material. Do you have any recollection of this?
I can see that kept Steven sharp on the world of words and puns, because they were always, you know, coming up with new words and to be competitive with each other at Scrabble. It was he and Mark and Steven that would play Scrabble all the time, and anyone else who was around that wanted to play.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that helped Steven with his, I guess, his ammunition, or his, all, you know, his lyrics are always so interesting and out there and different. And how did he connect this to that? It's kind of like a Scrabble board, you know.
We'll focus on the quasar in the mist. The Kaiser has a sis, and I'm a blank one.
Like, Quasar is a very Scrabble word, I'd say.
Yeah. Maybe that was one they played, and he just put that one in his package so he could use it somewhere.
I feel like Quasar is a word you would just get luck of the draw. You just get the letters, you'd be like, oh, I can spell Quasar. Like, just right away. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they were just trying to make a cool song that was like, you know, keep in mind one of the awkward aspects about being in a band in the 90s was the sort of emphasis and importance of the culture of making a music video, which doesn't really, even though bands still do it, I feel like it's not as important as it was then. Like, MTV was a force. Like, you know, having your video played on MTV was a big deal back then.
Yeah.
Guy named John Kelsey who'd made a couple of videos for us. Like, we just did that in one day in New York. It was just like, videos were important back then. Like, I don't even know if they are now. Like, I don't know how it works.
But are you saying there's a relationship to the song structure of Stereo and the art of video making?
No, but I'm saying that, like, I knew it kind of became pretty, like, quickly clear that this was going to be like the single.
Right. And are you?
You know what I mean? So, like, very much in the 3-minute form, very tight, very, like, hummable and listenable.
Funny. It's funny. It's just overt.
Funny.
Yeah.
Instantly recognizable. Like, obviously the Geddy Lee reference, like, got us a lot of publicity, and, like, that was just not by design. That was just all circumstantial. But
I remember practicing it here at my house, trying to get the groove on it.
It was a bit of a different groove for you, wasn't it?
Like, it had that rockin' part, but other than that, it was fairly similar, I guess.
Yeah. I remember friends and I would think about, like, that song and Blue Hawaiian had, I don't know how to describe those beats. I'm a drummer myself, and I can't even tell you how to describe those beats. They're vaguely hip-hop, maybe, you know? Like yeah. Was that surprising that was the feel for that song? Did that come about organically, or was that sort of a direction?
No, I think that was organic. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably what I just came up with on the spot, and maybe that was a little bit of a hip hop influence going on there, or that kind of groove. I don't know. Maybe so. I like both Blue Hawaiian and the Stereo song.
Yeah.
I think they turned out pretty good.
California. Earth people, I was born on Jupiter. Earth people, New York and California. Earth people, I was born on Jupiter. Earth people, New York and California. Earth people, I was born on Jupiter. Earth people, New York and California. Earth people, I was born on Jupiter.
Did you guys listen to much hip hop? I remember seeing Pavement on that tour, and Bob would invoke Kool Keith.
Yeah, and Dr. Octagon. Yeah, that's what we were listening to. So maybe that was part of the influence, a subtle part of the influence for that, and the kind of the rapping, singing that Stephen did. It could be definitely, picked up from, because we all like Kool Keith and his lyrics and his take on music. So I was really into him, that one album. I don't know if Matador put him out or not, but I remember Eyeball playing him a lot. So that caught on for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that had something to do with that feel.
Do you have any take on what is going on in this song? Because it's sort of a silly song. There's certainly, as a Canadian, I mean, the fact that Geddy Lee is mentioned kind of, it raised some eyebrows up here. I'm not going to lie to you, Steve. Do you have any sense of where the silliness of this song kind of comes from?
No, I really don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that Stephen was probably going, I've been here, I've been there on these other albums, and maybe I'm just going to turn up the silly a little bit for these other songs and try to make them a little bit more commercial or poppy.
Right. Okay. And
kind of like the Cut Your Hair, an extension of Cut Your Hair, but down another road. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe so. I mean, you have a lot of that, wanting to be on the radio and being a hit, and we weren't. So it was maybe poking fun at himself and at the band at the same time.
Oh yeah, that's true. The chorus, I never really even delved into the chorus. It's sort of like it's one of the most disconnected songs, it feels like, in terms of any kind of narrative. The verses are their own thing, and then there's just a guy saying he's on the stereo.
Yeah.
Which is it's all well and good. I love it. It's an unlikely hit song in some ways.
Yeah. And what drugs was he on when he was writing that? I don't know.
No, the only people in our band that could play their instrument and sing at the same time were obviously Malkmus, Canberg, and Wes can. Wes can definitely drum and sing at the same time.
Right. Okay.
So Wes was really important he actually did it during his era in the band, which is somewhat overlooked. He actually did a massive amount of live background vocals.
Yeah, I remember seeing that happen. Yeah.
Yeah, he's really good. Plus, he's a great front man. That's all besides the point. Wes' contributions to Pavement are immense, because he would actually especially if it wasn't for Wes, I'm not really sure if Crooked Rain ever would have happened, because all those songs, the only two people living in the same town ever in the history of Pavement, really, aside from the Stockton years, were West and Malkmus, lived in the same neighborhood in Brooklyn, and they worked on Crooked Rain for months before anybody else participated in it.
Did they both work at the museum?
Oh, yeah, but I think this is post-museum for both of them, because I think that, at that point, I'd moved to Louisville. Canberg was in Sacramento, I believe, San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And this is before Wes. Wes got the house where he lives now in the country outside of Lexington, Virginia. Got that after Lollapalooza.
Right. Okay. I mean, the first two songs on this record are both funny, I'd say. Stereo and Shady Lane are both memorable, catchy. I think I've told you I continue to sing these songs as lullabies to my kids because they have that they have a jingly, jangly, memorable, playful kind of phrasing and feeling to them.
Kids like stereo. And they like Summer Babe. Kids really like stereo. I think
well, it's like a rap. It's like a rap. It's almost like a rap song.
It's corny and it's fun and I know Steven would get really tired of it. I think he sort of found it kind of cute.
He still, the last time I saw the Jicks, they did it.
Yeah, no, he'll do it. You know what I mean? He's not against doing it. But
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I remember playing it on Conan O'Brien.
My next guests are here to perform a song from their new album, Brighten the Corners. And they'll be appearing this Sunday as a part of the big Tibetan Freedom Concert on Randall's Island right here in New York City. Please welcome Pavement.
And the thing that stands out to me most about that day, you spend an alarming amount of time at a TV studio when you do these things. Like, people don't realize that when they see a band on, like, the Tonight Show, they don't realize that the band's actually been there for 10 hours, and which is kind of weird. But I remember that Mark, on the way up to go in there and do that, he unfortunately suffered an incredibly bad crick in his neck. So the whole time I was worried about his neck because he was in some pain. He's really tough. He was in some pain, and but Stereo was just like. The great thing about that song is whenever we played it during that era, and then even in 2010, is like it's one of those. It's a true Pavement crowd pleaser. So it was always a joy to like see it on the set list and know that like is one of those songs where we could kind of get the crowd back on our side, even if we did like an average version of it. It was easy to record. Yeah, we already had it. And it's not that difficult. It was easy. For Pavement, we actually worked quite a bit each day on the songs. I'm going to say like maybe an average of 4 hours a day on the music, which is not a lot for most bands. But I think we booked in like 10 days or 2 weeks there. So it didn't, like we're never one of those bands, like a lot of bands that like, okay, we've got 20 hours. Let's make music for 16 of them. Like, it's always like the schedule was always like you're sort of there, but like you're actually only playing music like a fifth of the time.
Right.
You're just, it's more like we're all hanging out and having a good time. Like,
yeah. And
that's just because, and then I think Steven, like, and Scott, like on his songs, they actually had to work a little bit harder than us. Like, anyways, like I think the point is, I think it's pretty well known that I always had it pretty easy.
Blind date with the chancer, we had oysters and dry lancers, and the check when it arrived, we went Dutch, 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 Dutch. A redder shade of neck on a whiter shade of trash, and this emery board is giving me a rash. I'm flat out, you're so beautiful to look at when you cry.
All right, we're going to move on to Shady Lane. Shady Lane is a beautiful song. It's a classic, I think, for Pavement fans. And what is your take on Shady Lane exactly? What do you make of this song?
I think at that time we were all doing different things and kind of growing up and growing to maybe not, growing beyond the beginnings of the band, and maybe that was his take on, what he wanted or whether he wanted, reflecting about a home place or something. And I think he was in the midst of moving to Portland, and I had just moved here to Virginia, and Bob was in Louisville, so I kind of always looked at it as that, kind of the extension of Range Life and that narrative that he played out.
Yeah, it's you guys were in your own way a very reflective band, weren't you? I mean, you were kind of thinking about yourselves and your generation. It felt like, I don't want to put too much of a weight on your shoulders in retrospect, but it did feel like people of my generation. I'm younger than you guys, but it seemed relatable. As abstract as the music was, it seemed quite relatable.
Yeah, I think he had a good way of reflecting what was going on around him and in society in a very obscure way, but especially that Crooked Rain album, the California feel, even though we recorded it mostly in New York, and he had been in New York for the past couple of years, it really has a California feel to it.
Yeah, it does for sure. You mentioned that, you guys had a little bit of a break after touring Crooked Rain, Wowie Zowie, just touring a lot, and you took a little bit of a break. Was it grueling being in Pavement ahead of Brighten the Corners?
I think we were all feeling our, tired in the band. The band was growing older, and So, as any marriage, you go through bumps and stuff, and we were probably hitting our bumps around then, relationship-wise, and, you go through it, and you're thinking, oh, maybe this one will be something where we're a big hit. And I think by then, all of that big hit expectations or beliefs that might happen were pretty much like, no, this is not going to happen. Let's just go and not worry about it. Mm-hmm. So maybe that is alluding to your more mellow feels, like, don't worry about it, just play what you want.
Yeah, you guys became sort of more jammy, it feels to me, on this record. Yeah,
I guess so, a little bit. I don't know, it's hard for me to tell.
It's a weird I know jammy has a weird connotation, but you spread out a little. Yeah, the songs are a little longer. There's it just feels like a little more laid back on some level, somehow. Yeah. Yeah. And
a little more classic rock is what I always read in the reviews, and I can hear that.
Yeah, I can hear that too. In the live configuration, you and Bob would play drums together. Bob would do a few different things, but you'd play drums together. Did you record drums together, like playing together?
Yeah, in that recording session, he was in the room with us, and he had his drum kit and mine there. But I think they were able to, separate the sounds, so it wouldn't be so much bleed. But yeah, you can hear his drums in some of those songs.
Yeah, okay.
As well as mine. So yeah, but you can definitely tell when he's playing his, like, there's certain sections and quieter sections where you hear something he's doing.
Oh, okay.
As well as mine, or the percussion and keys and things like that he added to the mix.
That was that for some people that you mentioned classic rock. That's kind of a Grateful Dead thing, almost.
Yeah, and maybe not. Neither one of us are anywhere of the same caliber, Grateful Dead drummers, but maybe on a little bit more of a junior side. But yeah,
yeah, there's a bit.
No, the people love to compare us to the Dead, especially in California. Same attitude towards touring and playing and putting out records. I think I admire that about the Dead.
Yeah.
And then the fans, that though we didn't have the huge fan base like that, but they were very loyal and would put up with our good and bad shows.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought of that. And do you find that the Dead have swung back around to being sort of beloved more than they were? I feel like they were derided at the time that you guys were, say, touring behind Brighten the Corners. But it feels like there's some love for them now.
Yeah, I would think so, because they did a lot of great stuff.
Yeah.
And, you get sick of something when it's all around you all the time, and they've been doing it forever.
Yeah.
But, what they did shines through in the long run, because there was such a lot of great material as well as the not-so-great material.
Yeah. And you worked with Spike Jonze around this time.
Oh, no, yeah, and Spike Jonze made Shady Lane, and he'll tell you that it's the worst thing he's ever done. Like,
oh, really?
He was a big Pavement fan, and he wanted to make us a good video. And of course, his career was, definitely kicking off at the time and stuff. And like, he was excited to work with us. And like, that was by far the most expensive video we ever did. I think the budget was definitely over $40,000 if I had to guess, which was a boatload. And he just I don't mind it, but he looked at it as like total fail. Like,
At the end of Shady Lane is an instrumental, J versus S. Do you have any insight about where that came from or why that's part of this song?
I don't even know if we played that at the same time. I think he did. I think we did play that at the same time, but, I don't think it was tacked on post, live recording of it in the studio. I think that was just something he wanted to put on there, and we did that.
Okay.
I'd have to listen to it again to make sure, but always like that.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's sort of fleeting, but it's there.
Yeah, it's like it could have gone on farther, but it's fleeting.
Do you have any insight as to what J versus S might mean?
No. No, I don't.
Were you a band that communicated much to each other? I mean, I know Steven, it's by the sounds of it, Steven would make a lot of these decisions, maybe name things. Did you ever talk about these things with each other?
No. He never talked about it. You giggle if it was something that was funny or very, very witty. J versus S. I might have heard what he was talking about then.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what it was.
I think actually J versus S was just like a natural transition, like where we actually found like a really good groove when we recorded that version of Shady Lane, and Malcolm sort of in an impromptu fashion decided to like kind of jam it out a little bit. That's where the J versus S song comes from, the slash bit, and then I don't know who J is, I don't know who S is, but if I had to guess, that J might be J Mascis.
Oh, and the S is Steven?
No, I don't know who that would be, but I just know who. It's definitely not Steve Shelley.
You better find your way out. You better learn how to run. You better walk away and leave the angles for the shills. Well, I've been thinking for days about the means and the ways that I could hate all I touch. I know you're my lady, but I could trickle, I could flood. A voice coach taught me to sing, he couldn't teach me to love. All the above. Easy talking, border blocking, transport is a
We're going to move on to one of the standout tracks on this record, Transport is Arranged.
Transport is Arranged would definitely be, not only one of my favorite songs on the record, but probably one of my favorite. If somebody asked me what my favorite Pavement song is of all time, that's actually it. And then there's actually a really cool live version of it on YouTube from a concert that we played in Italy, that when we showed up at 4 p.m, like the stage hadn't even been built yet, so we didn't even know if this thing was going to come off, and then somehow they threw it all together. It was very DIY, and there's a couple thousand people there. It was in the middle of nowhere in Italy, and it was good. But Transport is Arranged is a Pavement song that worked pretty easily in the studio and worked live, and I guess I would have to call it a very overlooked Pavement song.
Do you have any recollection of where this song came from?
I have no idea. They're his songs. He wrote, wrote the lyrics, so It could be something about his childhood. I don't know.
It's a curious phrase, Transport is Arranged, which, again, I'm not looking so much about interpreting the songs themselves as much as your experience, recording them. So forgive me for delving into it too much, but it is a weird. It's a sort of a spooky song, and that's always been my take on it. There's a couple of kind of spooky songs on this record. There's a lot of paranoia, I think, on the record that I pick up on, and then also, like you said, that kind of restlessness, the kind of like coming of age but leaving maybe your 20s. Which is that where you guys would have been? You're entering your 30s, probably.
Yeah, probably. He was probably turning 30 around then.
Yeah. Yeah, did you feel that? You mentioned, like, I think we talked about this actually. Like, it did feel like things were shifting a little bit underneath the band. People were moving away and whatnot.
Yeah. You can look at the timeline and it makes sense. That was like the fourth album. They'd been together since '89, and you do your things, and it's only going to be so long, or else you're going to be like a band that goes on forever and ever. And we knew we weren't going to be that. That's what we weren't about. So
yeah,
it was kind of natural. Yeah. I think he wanted to go and play with other people that might have been more proficient, and he has, and he's done great. So
yeah,
happy for him. But to me, it's a totally natural thing.
Yeah. There's a lot more keyboards on this record, or at least, there's been keyboards on all sorts of Pavement records, but I feel like this song, Transport is Arranged, begins with like an organ sound. And Steven, was that mostly Steven doing that stuff, doing that playing?
Yeah, he would play that. That was probably Mitch Easter's influence with the instruments he had in his place. He had lots of cool different instruments in his house, keyboards, and Steven was like that. If there was something in the studio that he never played before, or he would incorporate it into the song. In that last album, there was a banjo part. Somebody had just bought a banjo, like a mini banjo, and he put it into the song, and it worked.
Yeah.
So he's very off the cuff that way, and a lot of times it was very magical, and it was appropriate. And it also extended the sound of the band, so you didn't get in too much of a rut of the same sound all the time.
Yeah. What you mentioned, you guys practiced at your house. Were there songs on this record that emerged at Mitch's place? Like you mentioned that Steven would look around the studio and find something that interested him and then incorporate it into a song that I presume wasn't there before when you came into the before you came into the studio. Were there sort of pure studio creations on this record that you can recall?
I doubt it. He usually has stuff up his sleeves no matter what. He might not have played them off with us. We were very slack about preparing for stuff.
Oh, you were?
Live and albums.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we never practiced, so... I mean, we did come here to practice some of the songs, so we probably had 6 of them where we knew what we were doing, and the rest you just kind of had to learn in the studio.
Yeah.
That's the way we did it.
Yeah. So
sometimes it made magic, and sometimes it was okay. Well, we'll go with this.
Speaking of magic, I think we should move on to Date with IKEA, which is, I think it's not arguable to say it's one of Scott's strongest songs. Would you agree?
Sure. Yeah. He's got a couple up there that are real solid.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call pop songs, but real straightforward and catchy.
Yeah. This is a record where he invokes a couple of brands in his songs, the Volkswagen Passat, and then in this case, Date with IKEA. Do you have any sense of where he was coming from with a song like this?
I always thought, maybe we all thought it too, I don't know, but it was he had bought a house in California and was trying to, furnish it. So I think maybe it came from the idea as like they had a date to go to IKEA. That's what we always thought, but of course I'm sure it's not just about that, but it's the name that comes out of the activity that, seemed to fit. So,
do you think he was resisting the kind of suburban aspect of that, going to IKEA?
No, I don't think so. I think it was reflecting on it. He's always been about city planning and architecture and landscapes.
Yeah.
So I think he was just trying to draw his own pictures.
So when Scott, is there any distinction between how Scott and Steven would bring songs to the band? Because you mentioned Steven would come in with some pretty solid ideas that he would modify if he felt compelled to. Was Scott similar or was it different?
Scott showed up at this recording session in Kernersville with a game plan. We all sort of knew his songs. We all had like a good amount of confidence in Date with IKEA, and Scott is a lot easier to record with than Steve, because I think basically his songs are easier to drum on, and Scott is also like, that's good, dude, that's good enough. One of those kind of guys. So like, that would have been fast.
I think mostly Scott would kind of come in with a riff or something, and he'd build from that. Yeah, and then kind of build the song in the studio. I do remember a lot of his songs. He and I would play just the two of us, and then they would build from that. And and then it would turn out to be what it was. And I don't remember him like singing into a microphone, but he might have, to kind of give me directions on what was the chorus and the verses and stuff.
Was this a song that you remember coming together relatively easily, or was it tricky?
No, I think it came together pretty easy. After, Steven's songs, he would have so many, and they were a lot trickier. Scott's it was always a little easier for me to like, okay, this is Scott's song, and we get in a groove, and like I said, kind of build from a groove and take it from there.
Yeah. Okay.
When Steven had more of an idea maybe of what exactly he wanted, and so that was something to achieve rather than just kind of going with the flow with Scott. It was just two different people working with two different people.
Yeah, because you came to the band later than I guess you would have been the last addition to the band, frankly, of the the most well-known configuration on some level. Do you have a bit of detachment from the band in some ways? Do you feel like ownership over Pavement in some way? I notice you're deferring a lot to Steven and Scott, and that's fine. These are their songs ostensibly, but you are in the band, right?
Yeah. I was in the band, but like I say, I played the drums, and you said I came later, and I did. So I think that they experienced the kind of like that early hysteria when you go from just being a couple guys playing together to being known and written about. And I jumped in after all of that happened. So they probably, the rest of the guys, have a more whole experience than me. I didn't experience that. I was a replacement, so to speak. So I just have a different take on it.
Okay.
I love the band probably just as much as they do.
Was it weird for you to jump into a band that like you jumped in when it was starting to go nuts, relatively nuts? Like was it weird?
It was hard to fill Gary's shoes, I would say. He was such a beloved character and a great musician, but in terms of the guys in the band, I've known Bob since he was like 12 or 13 or 14 years old, and I'd worked with Steven at the Whitney, and been playing music with him for about a year, different jam things with the Jews at my loft in New York. So it wasn't that hard.
Okay.
And, like I said, we didn't really practice, so it wasn't like I was left out. I kind of knew some of those Crooked Rain songs more than anybody else because he and Steven had been working on them. So when we finally got around to playing them, we were all really learning how to play them together. So.
Okay. All right. No, I was actually referring more to the kind of hysteria. Like that attention that you were talking about that they had to deal with all of a sudden. You kind of came in just as, magazine profiles, video stuff, all that stuff seemed to be really going by the time you joined the band.
Right. So as part of my identity, I'm probably maybe a little less because it was at a certain level when I became, I was in the band, whereas they went from being just the guys in the band to, pictures and growing through it and seeing how it changed and morphed to a certain level. When I got in it, we were at a certain level, and we pretty much stayed that way until 2010.
Right.
And we all of a sudden were much bigger for some reason.
I think absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, maybe so in this case.
Watch him reinvent the wheel. But I don't need your summary acts to give into the narrative. Where to begin? I will say set you back, set you back, set you.
Old to Begin and Type Slowly both sort of fit, as I was talking about before, like the vibe of the record in terms of us being more, I'm not going to say laconic, or like, we've always gotten the tag of being slacker rock for our work ethic, but like these were actually like very laid back Pavement songs. Like, I'm not sure what was going on over there, but like these guys, Malcolmus especially, like it's almost like reflected like the fact that, okay, we've been around now for a while and like we're not lazy, but like we can kind of do things on our own terms.
Searching for latent cause, blame it on menopause, or perhaps stress and strain, credit cards, bumper pain. But I've seen you double dares, everything's extraordinary. I know the things you do gonna come back.
We were talking earlier about sort of the calmer aspect of Brighten the Corners in relation to some of the other records that preceded it, but this Old to Begin has a screaming part where Stephen just kind of screams the end of the song. Do you know what I'm referring to? Where he's just like, rah, rah, rah. He's like a roaring at the end.
Yeah.
It's a real release, and it's a bit like there's a little bit of that on stereo where the chorus is like him kind of screaming, but do you have any recollection of how you all arrived at that being a part of that song, of him just kind of, basically doing this noise, vocal noise?
He would do his vocals usually the very last thing, either in the studio where we recorded or even in the mixing studio. A lot of times, all the times we go mix somewhere else. So he could have done that whole vocal at a completely different, not even at in North Carolina at Mitch's. I don't remember.
Oh, you don't remember that?
No, I don't remember him recording that, screaming like that. I remember on Wowie Zowie, one of the songs where he was screaming a lot, and we thought it was cool. But that was, he didn't usually do his vocals while we were doing the basic tracks, because he would change the lyrics, and he would, he might do a scratch vocal, and sometimes they keep that. But I think a lot of times he would polish it up in the mixing studio.
Yeah. Did Old to Begin evolve much when you played it live? Did that screaming part change? Did any of it change?
All the screaming parts, a lot of times Bob would take over so Stephen wouldn't lose his voice.
Ah, okay.
Or Stephen wouldn't scream so he wouldn't lose his voice and it just wouldn't scream. But yeah, our songs always kind of morphed that way in small ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. I particularly love the set of lyrics in Type Slowly, which is, easily one of the best songs on the record.
Sherry, you smell different. Get up early in the bed. For you morning comes so easy. Spells have been cast and the urge has been lost. Snipers posted bills as they should of our midnight vacation. Back on the planet now, I'm beginning to see just how. Echelon your dreams and they'll come true. Type slowly.
There's quite a bit of synthesized sound, keyboards and stuff on throughout this record. Did you formulate that? I know you get credited with playing that stuff, but
I played some of it, but I can't play very well, so and I'm sure I added some bits, but I had a Nord lead. I bought one back then. I didn't really know what it was, but Will Oldham's little brother Paul had told me about it. I went out and bought one in Indiana. So it was there, and like we were playing. It was like a toy. Like none of us could really work out what was going on with it, but we fiddled with it all the time. And then Mitch had some good stuff. Mitch had some good old organ type things. Like he had some good things. Like I think so. Like when you show up to record in a studio, one thing that you're definitely going to do is like take advantage of what's there, especially if you can play. And so yeah, Malcolmus, like he would have added like anything well played on keyboards.
In the context of talking about Type Slowly, I just want to ask you if you guys talked about politics much at the time. There's a lot of like I said, there's some paranoia. There's some I detected a fair amount of spy stuff and like kind of like detectives and espionage and things like that. And Type Slowly has a little bit of a political undercurrent, I think, in a weird way. Did you guys talk much about stuff like that?
No. Stephen was always reading, so he might have been reading some spy novels at the time, and that influenced his writing or his thinking. But no, we didn't talk about that stuff.
Trolls in the Glen are consorting again. The liberals say they don't exist, but I know they do. That almost feels like something that could be happening now. You know?
Yeah.
Just like mistrust, misinformation, fake news. Like it just feels very prescient in some way.
Right. What's the one about the air? They all sell the air to us. I don't know if it's off that album or not, but the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Kind of a slight on capitalism.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you were you all kind of aligned with? Were there ever disagreements about the songs? I just was curious. Like, would you ever question what Scott or Stephen were writing about, or provoke them to talk about it a little bit?
No. If we thought something was stupid, I'm sure that somebody would poke fun of him, but not say it straight to his face, but just like start repeating the little part over and over again. That might annoy him. But,
yeah.
No, I mean, the guy is a craftsman. I mean, he's amazing. So
yeah,
and Scott can write some good stuff as well. So, you know, in any band, you're teasing each other about, you know, your lines in the songs, but that's more of just a family and tease rather than a comment on politics or anything like that.
Right. Was Type Slowly particularly fun to play for you?
Yeah, I love playing that one. It's fun. And Bob and I got to play together well on that, so it had a good Rolling Stones feel to me.
Oh, Rolling Stones. That's interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one that thought that, but it had a good classic rock feel to it.
It does, but it actually, there's a live version or two kicking around where the guitar, it actually reminds me, I don't know if you're going to take this the right way or not, but it vaguely reminds me of the Doors.
Uh-huh. Well, that could work.
Is that bad? Do you hate me? I didn't mean to.
No, I was a big Doors fan when I was a kid. So.
Yeah, me too. And that's why just some of the guitar tones and some of the live recordings I've heard kind of remind me of Robbie Krieger. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, it's just this kind of snaky, you know, haunting lines, you know, and it has that. This seems like a very California song to me somehow.
Yeah.
Embassy Row, the fumes they lay low on lanes that are wide where the limousines ride on the wrought iron gates and the bone china plates, and don't forget your manners where the anthems play. In the never war of poor and beast, in the never war of poor and beast, in the never war of poor and beast, I'm gonna take the crown, I'm gonna take the crown, I'm gonna take the crown, I'm gonna take the crown.
Embassy Row was a banger for this record. This is kind of like our cream of gold or something. Like it was like aggro. It was fun, you know. I think he even tries to get a little political with the lyrics, but you'd have to ask him about that.
He seems on this record to be interested in spies. There's a lot of like spy kind of like paranoia stuff that I don't know what was going on, or if you have any insight there.
I think he likes the word spies. He's saying that a lot. It's just like my friend Vicky Wheeler correctly pointed out years ago that like Malcolmus has when he can't find any words to sing, he always just sings that he's waiting. Like, you'll hear that. I'm waiting. You always hear him say that, like waiting for what? It's like, I just think he just likes to sing that verb.
Right.
But yeah, no, spies. Like, it's the kind of thing that sounds good with his voice. Like, he just goes, spies, like it's been there since like the early days.
Yeah, but I think there's like a lot of like weird paranoid, like foreign, like Embassy Row. There's kind of this sense that something is sort of underfoot. I don't know. It's just like almost like a criminal element to some of the songs I found, and I wondered where that was coming from.
Well, I'm sure he could probably be pretty paranoid. That maybe it was premonitions of what would be happening, like in the last 5 years. But
yeah, that's a fun one to play. I think that he derived that Embassy Row maybe had something to do with his time at UVA.
Oh, at the university.
It might be, or it could be Embassy Row in Washington, D.C. But for some reason, I think it has something to do with UVA.
Why do you think that?
There might be a street called, no, that wouldn't make sense. Embassy Row? I don't know. I just think that's popping up in my head about it. So
again, this is one of these songs that reminds me of kind of international diplomacy. You mentioned possibly spy novels or something. It does feel like that. Like there's like danger lurking around the corner on Embassy Row. That's what I feel like.
Yeah.
And it comes across as one of the most punk rock moments on the record, if I may.
Yeah. Yeah. Steven loves his punk. He's a punk at heart.
Oh, welcome to my friends. This house is a home, and a home's where I belong, where the feelings are warm and the foundations are strong. If my soul has a shape, well, then it is an ellipse, and this slap is a gift, 'cause your cheeks have lost their luster. You know your cheeks have lost their luster. You know your cheeks have lost their luster.
We talked a little bit about Blue Hawaiian, which is, I think, a play on Blue Hawaii. Am I wrong?
Blue Hawaiian, I think that was a name I came up with, and I can't remember. I think that was one of the song titles I came up with that Steven liked, and he kept it.
What are you an Elvis person?
I love Elvis, and I can't remember. I think it might have been, you know what I think it was? It was a drink.
Oh.
That we had at the Tibetan Freedom Concert in San Francisco at this bar with all the superstars from the Tibetan Freedom Concert. And, I might have been talking about that, or that stuck in my mind or his mind. And that's why we named it that.
Did you guys?
Just was a phrase, that you were like, okay, that's a good name. Use that.
Okay. And I mean, he actually invokes aloha in the lyrics.
Aloha means goodbye. And also hello, it's in how you inflect. Put the bark in the dog and you've got a guardian. When the capital's S, it is followed by a T. And it's probably me. And the tones are grouped in clusters. You know the tones are grouped in clusters.
Do you remember that? Aloha means goodbye and also hello. It's like a little educational moment.
Yeah.
For those of us who haven't been to Hawaii, you're like, oh, is that what? I didn't know that. And then you go to the internet and you're like, oh, he's right. It does mean hello and goodbye. It's in how you inflect.
Actually, you got a lot of guff on this record. I remember when, I believe Spin Magazine reviewed it. The woman who reviewed it was particularly put off by Blue Hawaiian, where he says, this slap is a gift because your cheeks have lost their luster.
Right.
Okay, so she sort of kind of attacked him as that being sort of like a misogynist type statement, which just to be flat out honest, it's pretty off base. I mean,
yeah.
It's just like, first of all, you're assuming genders, and it's just like, who knows what he was doing? Like, I think that his gift as a lyricist is that, whether they be non sequiturs or however he likes to say it, it's like, I guess, one of his heroes being Stipe, and and of course Lou Reed, and then you think of like things that he really loved as well, like all the krautrock bands, whether it be Amon Düül or Popova or of course Cannon Faust, like having to explain your lyrics and having your lyrics be sort of like, Dylan-esque, or dare I say like one of our peers Berman-esque, where he's actually like trying to actually say something. I think that, in somewhat intentionally, like, most of his lyrics like should really never be dissected, because they were just sort of there to amuse, and he would change them all the time to entertain himself. It was just, and like, he's also very self-conscious about his singing voice, which I think he's never really thought of as the strength of his game. He actually had to, kind of teach himself to sing throughout his career, because he's a good singer, but he's not what you call a gifted singer.
Well, he does show off a lot of vocal range on this record, a lot of high singing, and there's the part in Old to Begin where it's just screaming. Just sort of showing off his, and a lot of the B-sides on off of this record, there's a lot of yelling and screaming, and it's interesting. It's fascinating to me, because I think I've always loved his singing, and I think he's a great singer myself.
Well, no, I mean, I think he's a good singer, but like, you got one aspect of his singing is that he made sure that with his sets of lyrics that he was singing words that he could sing.
Yeah, I mean,
so that was actually a factor in his lyrics, which it probably isn't for a lot of other lyricists. Like, he would like the way his voice sounded singing certain words. So if you think about, like, probably the best set of lyrics on this record, perhaps aside from Stereo Shit, I mean, one of his best sets of lyrics is Transport is Arranged.
Absolutely, yeah.
And those are all words that he can sing really well. And like, again, like, I hate to always do this to people when we're talking about Steven specifically. It's like, I don't know how, and it would always confuse Gary when Gary was in the band. Like, Gary would always be like, I have no idea how this kid comes up with this crap. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, and he'll tell you, too, like, it was just fun for him. Like, he knew when he stumbled upon something good, whether it was when it came to words and lyrics. Like, guitar is, like, so easy for him. It's, like, easier for him than, like, me making a grilled cheese sandwich right now. I mean, like, he's a freaky guitar player.
I think he's one of the great guitar players of all time that I've come across, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like, and I think that, I mean, there's no doubt about that for me, but like, but that's the aspect of being in a band that comes really easy to him. And I think that's sort of like, from what I've heard of the Jicks, like seeing them live, and then the records that I know and the songs that I know, is like, he does really strut his stuff on guitar in that band a lot.
Yeah.
Which is good. And he very much does so in Pavement. He very, very much does so on this particular record. And then, I mean, in fact, like, he had to teach me, like, I had to play the Blue Hawaiian keyboard part live, and it was very tricky for me. Like, even though, like, it would not be tricky for, like, a 7-year-old that knew how to play piano. I mean, I actually had to, like, tape keys, and, like, I'd always be, like, really happy when that song was over and I didn't really mess it up, because it was actually, like, kind of an intricately played keyboard solo for me. Yeah, I'm much more comfortable with 2 drums and a cymbal or maracas or whatever.
And we talked a bit about this groove business with Stereo and Blue Hawaiian, and I think we covered it rather well, but did it feel like a departure in some way to play these kinds of beats?
No, I think that those were more influential on my part. Those 2 songs specifically. That little beat I did just because it worked. Stephen was something worked, he would be happy. You know,
Yeah.
and if it wasn't working, he'd tell you it wasn't working. So when it was working, you just went with it. And I can tell you that definitely, you know, it was something I just started playing along with, you know, his rhythm. So
Yeah. Do you have drummers you looked up to at the time? Like, were there the drummers that influenced you in particular when you played in Pavement?
there was more bands that I loved rather than specific drummers. You know, I always admire a great full band rather than, you know, a specific musician. You know, so I loved Echo and the Bunnymen and the Smiths and the Replacements. I guess Tom Waits,
Yeah.
Pogues. So, and like the classic rock, Rolling Stones. So
Yeah.
Who.
You mentioned Steven, and we've talked about Steven and Scott bringing songs to the table. Are you selling yourself short a little? Did you have a compositional role that you're not telling me about in any of these songs per se? Like you mentioned, you came up with some beats.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was usually, you know, you're just playing along, but I wouldn't say I came up with any. You know, I was just there to play with everybody else. You know, and everyone, I think, contributed quite equally, no matter what their role was.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, whether they were in the initial recordings or putting their stuff afterwards when they're doing overdubs and adding bass parts, or, you know, percussion with Bob or his screams or whatever. It's not a very traditional way of doing it, but it seemed to work with us.
Out beyond the call of duty, hold your instincts hostage and stick near me. Let's drink a toast. It's the most I can stand to cry about the mental energy you wasted on this wedding invitation. Let's thank the host. You've been such a great host. The roast was just so perfectly prepared. Now I know you care. Now I know you care. We are underused. We
We Are Underused was sort of an experimental song for us, and that we were trying to do this like kind of corny thing where like we try to like harmonize and everybody tries to sing, and like We Are Underused was sort of like a comment by the lead singer on the rest of the band, sort of chiding us in a way, like a kind way of putting, instead of We Are Underused, I think it was his own way of like telling the band like that we were sort of useless. Okay. So read into that what you want. Okay. But I always felt that like, you know, when we played it live, especially, we'd be like singing We Are Underused, and like it was kind of like Malcolmus did not hesitate at any point to like drop insults on the rest of us that we had to sort of like all take on the chin. And I think that like We Are Underused is actually along that vibe.
I like that song a lot. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's his take on, you know, where we were as a band at a time. We're underrated, or, you know, that's a characters. I think he would put himself into a lot of characters and go with feelings and that way.
Yeah, I spoke with Bob about this, and I always viewed this song as a song kind of. I earlier I'd said I felt like you guys were really good at reflecting your cohort of people, like in your generation, and I always thought We Are Underused was kind of about that. But Bob thought it actually had sort of a mean-spiritedness, and that it was about the band itself, and that Steven separate was kind of talking about the band and the feeling in the band, that you were underused, which had never occurred to me before. There's nothing about the lyrics that suggests that or anything. Does that ring true to you in any possible way?
No, not to me. I didn't take it that way. I took it more as we were underappreciated as a group, rather than like as, I guess, musicians within the group. But
yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, there's a whole song about how your drummer Steve West can't drum.
Steve, he cannot drum.
Right, which is so unfair. I thought that was really mean. And I think that was sort of taken the same way. Like, poor Steve West has taken a lot of abuse, and probably more abuse than anybody in Pavement.
That's
entirely unfair. Entirely unfair.
You're going to have to ask him. That's his lyric. I was away on my honeymoon, and I think that they were just at a loss maybe to what he was going to sing, so he started singing that. And they kept it. I don't think it was on the album.
No, it's a B-side. Yeah,
it ended up as a B-side, so I'm trying not to take it personally. He takes the piss out of a lot of people, and I'm sure I've taken the piss out of him at times too. So,
do you play on that song?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you play on that song too. You just did it. Okay. Imagine me being 17 or whatever I was, or 20. I think I was 20, and hearing that song, and I'm like, I had it. It was a B-side of a single, I think, and I was like, oh, I think Steve plays on this song that's sort of about him. And it's sort of an odd, that's nice. It's nice of you to actually play on a song that seems to be criticizing your ability to play on a song.
Yeah, well, like I said, he would write his lyrics later a lot of times, so he wasn't screaming Westy can't drum when I was drumming it.
Well, that's probably for the best, I would think, really. Okay.
Yeah, I might have been a little more awkward.
Because he had like the classic big shoes to fill, or little shoes with Velcro pullovers. In the case of Gary,
Gary's drumming does seem. He is one of the most distinctive drummers I've ever heard. He was a huge influence on me as a drummer.
Well, I mean, Gary is basically like at his absolute best. Which was pretty exceptional. He was like in the same class as Keith Moon. I mean,
well, the Watery Domestic EP in particular is just mind blowing. The drumming's incredible.
The guy's amazing.
Yeah,
the guy's amazing.
Yeah,
just amazing. And like when he was in the band and he was on, I'd be like, I guess all I have to do is stand here and drink beer. But keep in mind, there's a lot of times that he wasn't on. Now, Steve West, who I've been really good friends with since I was 13. He was basically always on his game with 2 or 3 exceptions. He was on his game a lot more than I was, but he was more of a solid classic rock drummer. And for him to like actually go back and like work really hard and learn a lot of Gary's intricate drum parts was like not easy work for him, and he pulled it off, and he sure as hell like proved that he could drum. Like, at least in my opinion, because like. When you're like, that's the thing. Is like Pavement always looked at the guys, the pretty boys in the front row don't really realize it, but like, the back line, which was the back line of the stage, was me and West. Okay,
yeah,
it's like a formation. Like Pavement is like, as you mentioned like earlier when you started to analyze the lyrics to Stereo, like there are more like sports references in Pavement throughout our history, like lyrically, and just like. Again, I mentioned, like, a lot of this recording session was built around watching the Olympics and bowling.
Yeah.
And then even, like, Scrabble is, like, it's like competition. There was always competition in the band. There was always competition. It wasn't, like, the kind of competition, like, my girlfriend's cooler than yours or, like, whatever. But it was more, like, competition, like, no. Like, we're playing now. Like, this is a game. And, like, the same is, like, people don't realize that about bands, like, I don't think other bands really had this ethic, but like we'd show up at like a festival, not necessarily Lollapalooza where we didn't have a chance, but like you'd show up at like Reading Festival or something, and there'd be like 9 bands playing on the bill, and like throughout the history of Pavement, we had a Dutch sound man who's still a dear friend of all of ours, named Remco Schouten, and Remco's a really good sound man. He was competitive about sound, and like you kind of like you sort of had this mentality when you'd show up these European rock festivals, that it was kind of like a battle of the bands, because like that was something that happened. I don't know if they still have that, but that was a big deal before Pavement existed. Like when I was in high school, like in the early 80s and in the 70s, of course, like 7 bands would show up and you'd get to play for 10 minutes. Like if you won, then like you got like your 7-inch put up by a local label.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember this era?
Oh, they still happen. They have them here in I'm calling you from Guelph. They have them to get into like the local big music festival.
Exactly. And we had that approach even after we were like, had been established and made records.
Right. Like an athletic competition.
Sounds, but
yeah.
That's the only way that we really knew how to approach, at least from my standpoint. Like I'd been in a lot more athletic competitions. I've been in a band.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's that element as well, as corny as that sounds. And like we were failures at sports, like maybe we got to get them back at music a little bit. Like like we all tried to play sports, and like Malcolmus is probably the best athlete in the band, but Steve West and I were pretty good, and Eibel was a hell of a skateboarder, and Scott played soccer and whatever. Like I don't mean to sound, I guess we were just a bunch of dumb jocks.
On to Passat Dream. This is another Spiral Stairs song. Do you have any particular perspective on Passat Dream in terms of even what either what Scott was going for in terms of lyrics or your participation in playing on this song, recording it?
I think that's again another time where he was kind of poking fun at consumerism. Passat is a certain type of car, and I do remember him saying they're great cars. So I think he's kind of picking up on like consumerism in a way, and poking fun at that.
Yeah. Was there anything about the song itself, like the structure or playing on it, that you want to highlight?
No, same thing. Pretty much he would groove, and he'd start playing a riff, and I'd start playing along, and that would be it,
Yeah.
And then we'd build from there.
These do stick out as, I think, 2 of his best songs. I don't know if you can be objective about that.
All the songs, Scott songs, are good. Hit the Plane Down kind of bugs me a little bit, but I like my drumming on it, so I like it. So
yeah.
But when he didn't write nearly as many as Steven, but when he did, they were good, solid songs.
I know that he was a little bit more conscious of shopping than the rest of us. So
well,
he's more,
I talked to Dan Behar about. We were talking about Brighten the Corners for quite a long time when he was on the show. And because I was asking him about some songs that seemed to be wary of domesticity, wary of settling down. And I thought from Rattle by the Rush on, from Maui Zowie, there seemed to be this, and it comes up here on this record too, this notion of like the mental energy you wasted on your wedding invitation. This kind of, I was talking to Dan about how I felt like Steven and Scott and you guys were probably just grappling with that age of like, oh shit, like all these people that we are friends with are settling down and we're these wild rock and roll guys, Yeah,
but the thing is, we were always really settled down. We were never actually really wild. Like even during all of Pavement, like, we all had girlfriends and in some cases wives, and like, that's the funny thing about like being in horse racing is a lot of people think, oh, you were in a band in your 20s, you must have been wild. Like we actually weren't that wild. Like,
yeah, okay, we
drank a lot of beer. No, we were actually very well behaved.
Well, it's just my reading of Scott's songs here and Steven's songs on some of the songs here are kind of making. It seems like it's making fun of conventional life a little bit.
Well, sure, yeah, no, absolutely. Like, don't you do that on a daily basis?
Yeah, I guess we all do. Yes,
we all do. So, like, yeah, that's all we were really doing. Like,
I heard what you said. The leaders are dead.
Starlings of the Slipstream, another kind of weird one. I have a version of this on an early bootleg, I think, called Stuff Up the Cracks.
What you said, the lawyers are dead, but they're robbing the skies. I wish they'd start dropping like flies. There's no coast of Nebraska. My mother, I forgot. Slavic princess with a rose in her teeth. Do you suppose she would bite you if she could? Insane cobras with the wood.
It could have happened. I don't think we did, though. We would practice some in New York at my loft there, so maybe he was coming up with it then, before I moved down to Virginia. But I don't remember playing that live before we had it recorded and sussed out, but
No,
it's possible.
I wonder if it dates back to Gary even.
I doubt that, because that was pretty far.
Okay.
From when, there was a whole Wowie Zowie and the EP in between that, and Crooked Rain, so that's like 3 years.
Do you know this bootleg, Stuff Up the Cracks?
Oh,
okay. I bought it for like $20 in 1995. And and it chronicles, it came out in 94, I think. And so it collects everything from, like 91 to 94. And there's some version of this song that seems to be played or recorded off a boombox or something.
Maybe it is something that he did a long time ago and never really sussed it out till then.
Yeah.
Till Brighten the Corners.
Yeah.
It could have been. I mean, the thing is, when I'd play Silver Jew stuff with he and David in New York in the loft, and Steven would play riffs that ended up on Pavement albums, and things that he would play with David, and they would end up with Silver Jew stuff. So
yeah.
I think he had a lot of ammunition in there, and it would come out over a time period, and when he felt there was time.
Do you have any perspective on this particular song as it exists on Brighten the Corners?
It's a beautiful song.
It is. Yeah, it is. It is. Is that the extent of what you want to say? Is there anything you remember about recording it?
No, I don't remember anything about recording. It's all a blur.
Okay, I'm sorry to keep prodding you, but you never. There's been a couple of occasions where I've prodded, and you're like, actually, I do have a thing to say about that, and I'm going to say it, and that's what I'm going for. I kind of want little stories.
You got to dig it out of them.
I'm trying. I'm doing my best. Yeah. You're being very kind about it.
Starlings of the Slipstream, like the great thing about that song was I actually owned a racehorse at the time called Steinland's Promise, and he was slow, like a lot of racehorses that I've owned, and I'd always change lyrics to Steinland's in the Slipstream, and I love that song.
Open call for prison architects. Send me your blueprints ASAP. Stack the walls such that I cannot breathe. Man, it's bleeding forever because of the weather. I hope soon to leave from the east. No more absolutes. No more absolutes. Stick your penitentiary clothes inside
always thought that like you've got to end an album properly.
Yeah.
And I think Fillmore Jive did that for sure. And I'm not sure what the last song is on Wowie Zowie.
It's Western Homes, I think.
Yeah, so that wasn't a proper finisher, but like Finn is like
Yeah.
Finn was like it was just like in your classic like, you know, European stylish European movie sense when like the movie's finally over and it says, you know, Finn on the screen. Like that's what that song was.
We're at the last song on the record, which is called Fin, or Finn. And this Bob speaks very highly of this song. He thinks this is an excellent album closing song. Do you have any take on this song?
Yeah, I think that's another one where he and I play together, and it is slow, methodic, and very straightforward. But it has that mood, kind of like what you were saying. It's kind of a dark mood, but it's kind of like Starlings has that uplifting. You know, I haven't listened to the album in a long time, so I'm trying to, you know, I'm kind of reflecting through your reflections and thinking, oh yeah, maybe there was a lot of spy stuff going on. And
Steven at the time had become really good friends with Justine Frischman from Elastica.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think there's like a lot of the lyrics from that actually are sort of based on their friendship, and her father was a really famous architect.
Oh, okay.
And he might have actually like designed some prisons in England, but that, again, that's guesswork on my part.
When you're working with someone like David or Steven, who I would argue are two of the greatest, you know, rock lyricists really ever, for my money, do you spend time with their words? Do you spend time, like, you're playing with them, but do you spend time afterwards just sort of trying to decipher what they're going after?
No, I try not to. Maybe that's why I'm easy to be around. You know, like I said, you'd kind of tease them on a phrase or something.
Yeah.
And make fun of it, but in a good way. You know, I think a lot of it is they're both wordsmiths and tune smiths, and it doesn't necessarily. I think David really thinks a whole lot about what he's saying and how he's saying it and how it comes across. He's a poet, and Stephen is more off the cuff, but he's got a huge gift of just being able to blurt it out. So, and he's been doing it forever. Well, both of them have, but for me, when I try to do that, sometimes it's a good and sometimes it's not. But they've got so much more, you know, their spectrum is so much. I'm more of a pun guy in my songs. I'm good at doing funny lyrics and having a sense of sarcasm or something to it. And they're much more cerebral and smart.
So we get to Kernersville, right?
Yeah.
And we've got these songs, and like we know some of the songs are good. Like we're anxious to, you know, just like every Pavement recording session. And then so Malcolmus, like during this period, like we were kind of like less and less like a noisy thing, and less like a punky thing, and like steering away from Wowie Zowie into like making kind of like rock songs, because we always just wanted, just like every other band, you don't want to be classified, you want to be treated as a rock band.
Sure.
Because that's like, you know, it's like, no, we play rock and roll. Like, you know, like so you meet somebody on a plane, they say, oh, you're in a band, like what kind of music you play? Then you don't want to like say, you know, start trying to have to explain genres to them. You just like say, we're a rock band. A lot of college kids like us. You know? I mean, that's like what you're doing. Like you meet a complete stranger and like they see you like, hey, what do you do? You know, like what, you know how uncomfortable plane conversations are. They can be, but
sure. Yeah. So,
you know, it's just like, we're just trying to be a rock band.
Does this record stick out for you as a particularly great Pavement album, or do you view them all the same? Does it actually stick out?
It sticks out. They're all different to me, and they all have their own charm to them. They all were fun to work on, and get across. The last one was a little bit harder because we were all getting ready to break up. But that one I like a lot because we do sound really good on it.
Yeah.
But, some of that is some people will say, well, yeah, the soul's not as much in that album. And so they miss that part. But I look at it as each album being different. So you come away with something. And they're each original. So it's a good evolution.
I mean, to me, like Transport is Arranged is one of my favorite Pavement songs.
Absolutely.
And Type Slowly to me is like, never did Pavement sound more like Led Zeppelin than then. And like, I think that at this point, Pavement could actually like jam. So, and that's where Wowie Zowie led us. Like we could actually like find the groove on songs and like jam them out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, yeah, and I think that's why we appeal to like Fish and like, bands like that, like even like Wilco, like a lot of bands that have like, covered us and played way better versions of our songs than we ever could. Even like, Nickel Creek, of course, eventually did Spit on a Stranger, which was a song which had not been created until the build up for the Terror Twilight record. But it was like we were like a real rock band. So we could play like, we could go to Pukkel Pop or we could go to Lowlands and we could actually like go into a tent and play for 4,000 people at midnight. And like, we could be more than just like playing songs in the 3-minute form, like Stereo and Shady Lane. We could actually jam out songs like Type Slowly.
Did you have a sense that the band might be winding down after that record was done, or after touring that record was done?
After
Brighten the Corners.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell that Steven was trying to. I think we were all getting worn out.
Yeah.
For sure. But, we were always like that. The Pavement was never any expectations from one album to the next. So it was just like, okay, we're done touring now. Let's take a break and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
So to me, to everyone, it was kind of like we could stay together forever. We could not, but we knew it wasn't going to be forever.
But so it was very much like sort of like Wowie Zowie in a lot of ways. Like, it's when we reached this point where we're actually like a good live band after years of having a reputation of being kind of shoddy and unpredictable live.
There's a news story, I think a month or two ago, that I think it was Scott suggested you guys might be back for an anniversary something or other. I think he said 2019. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yes, a guy at work, this Mexican guy came up to me and said, you are going to tour again. I read it on Wikipedia. So that's about all I've heard.
You haven't had a conversation together?
No. I saw Scott perform this summer, and I played a little bit with some of his songs up on stage in North Carolina when he came through. It was a lot of fun, but we did not talk about reforming that I can remember. But it was a long night.
Yeah. Would you, I mean, personally, would you like to play in Pavement again?
Sure. I had a great time when I was doing it, and the reunion went really well, so I'd be excited and enthusiastic to do it again for a limited time, like we did last time, or more or less.
Do you think it's time as a creative entity is I mean, it's obviously past. You don't see that happening.
Yeah, to like make new music?
Sure.
I doubt that's going to happen. I would seriously doubt that's going to happen because, you do a thing in a certain time and you have the groove and everything, and that's past. That was the past, and you got to let that be. And I think it's great to play the old songs and play them with, soul and feeling, and not have it be just the same songs every night, and, not do it too much where it becomes boring and, everybody's tearing each other's hair out. So I think what we did in 2010 was very successful on all sides, and I'd be up for doing that again.
We actually could be a really good rock band, which was a major step forward for us, because for many years, mostly due to the fact that we were generally unprepared and that we'd actually find our chops on tour, we actually could like show up there and be like kind of formidable and hold our own as a rock band. And I feel like Brighten the Corners might like be the record that sort of shows that the most.
Special thanks again to Bob Nastanovich and Steve West of Pavement for talking about Brighten the Corners on this, the 373rd episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and is available on almost every single podcast platform that you can fathom. If you can't find an episode or you want to learn more about me or sign up for my regularly scheduled newsletter, please visit my website, vishkhanna.com. You can like Creative Control with Vish Khanna on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Vish Creative, or follow me at Vish Khanna. Listen to a radio show version of Creative Control on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time around the world at CFRU.ca or on an actual radio at 93.3 FM if you're in or near Guelph. Also, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going. This episode would not be possible without our sponsors. I'd like to shout them out right now. Pizza Trocadero, whom you can call for pickup or delivery within the city limits of Guelph. Try them at 519-829-2444 or check them out at trocaderoguelph.ca. The Bookshelf, an independently owned bookstore, bar, music venue, and movie theater located at 41 Quebec Street in Guelph. Learn more about them at bookshelf.ca. Planet Bean, freshly roasted, fair trade certified organic coffee. More information about them, planetbeancoffee.com. And Granddad's Donuts, located at 574 James Street North in Hamilton, Ontario. Amazing donuts. Visit granddads.ca for more information about them. That's it for this lengthy historical episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I did. I learned a lot about one of my favorite records of all time. Again, there's many more episodes of this show. Go check them out. If you're new to the show, check them out. Stephen Malcolmus has been on the show. Bob Nastanovich has been on the show. The other Pavement-related conversations have come up, as I mentioned at one point. So yeah, listen to the show. Please rate and review the show wherever you listen to the show and give it a nice rating and review. Share the show. Tell your friends about the show. Download episodes, of course. Subscribe to the show and all those things. That's it for me. I will talk to you very soon. Goodbye for now.